Hello and welcome to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page. I am Kyle Boone, CBS Sports staff writer, and with me as always, smiling Mr. Adam Finklestein. How we doing?
I'm in my comfy chair. I'm in my comfy clothes. We've talked draft every day this week, but I just appreciate this platform because it's comfy.
It is, yeah. We've been in shirt and tie this week, or at least blazer.
A lot of sports coats. Yeah, a lot of sports coats.
Talking, mock drafts, lots of mock drafts. So we're going to swerve a little bit today, Fink. We're going to talk about the NBA draft because that's what we love to talk about here. Today, we're going to talk about sleepers in the NBA draft. And I want you to qualify for us, Finklestein, how we came to the conclusion of the list of sleepers that we're going to talk about.
Well, I think just for a little context, it starts because whether it is on CBS Sports HQ, CBS Sports Net, or any number of different CBS platforms, 24/7 Sports, we've talked a lot about the draft in the last, especially since the combine, especially since the lottery. So in the last 10 days, right? And a lot of that naturally is about Cooper Flagg, the Bucks, what's Giannis going to do, Dylan Harper, like Dallas Mavs, all that stuff. But I think we have kind of talked about the same guys quite consistently. And I think because we are as passionate about this as we are, there's some other guys that we can kind of peel the onion back on and dig into beyond the Cooper Flaggs, Ace Baileys, Dylan Harpers, VJ Edgecombs, Trey Johnsons, Con Kneppels of the world. And so that's what we're going to talk about here. So I think sleeper would qualify as, I know for me, I've got one who I think is a lottery sleeper. And then I've got another who I think is a first round sleeper. Well, I'd probably say I've got two that are first round sleepers. That's what I've got. What do you got?
Okay. Yeah. I've got guys who I think are probably unanimously projected as first round picks to varying degrees. Like someone who I think could, sneak into the back half of the lottery, someone who's probably going to be a top 20 pick, and then someone who's maybe in the 20 to 30-ish range, depending on where you look at it. So I'm just going to toss it to you. You throw me your first name. Let's talk some players. We got 6 guys we're going to go through.
All right. So my first sleeper, and this is really for, I think, local fans in the U.S. And that guy, and I want to make sure I get the pronunciation right. I'm going to do my best. Yoan Berija.
Yeah.
It looks like Joan Behringer, I think is how it spells it here. But Yoan Berija is what I think is my best guess at the pronunciation. And we are talking about one of the highest level athletes for a big guy in this draft. He's one of the youngest players in the draft. He's only 18 years old. In fact, I believe he is the third youngest player. Measured 6'9.5" without shoes on at last year's Euro camp. He's recently said in an interview that he's grown another inch and he's approaching 6'11" without shoes on. We've seen reports of a wingspan anywhere from 7'4" to 7'5". So by all accounts, he is extremely long and he is exceptional athletically. I mean, he runs with long, fluid strides. He's an explosive leaper off of 1 foot, off of 2 feet. I think he can move laterally a little bit. He can cover the court. I think he's got good hands on top of that. So, and you've heard me talk about this a lot, Boone. From an archetype standpoint, the one that we have seen hit most consistently, I think, particularly in the last 2 and 3 years, is this shot blocking, rim running, lob threat big. And Berija is that and more. Now he's young and he's inexperienced because he didn't even start playing basketball until 4 years ago. Grew up playing soccer. So he's going to require some patience, but it does not take a nuanced scout to see how physically gifted this guy is and how it could potentially translate to the NBA. In terms of shot blocking, he led the Adriatic League in block percentage this year. Again, he's 18 years old. And I go back to the fact that he can jump off of 1 or 2 feet. So there's a lot to like. He's going to need some patience because he's only been playing the game. He's really young and he's only been playing the game since 2021. But this to me is someone who I think local fans may not be aware of to the extent that NBA executives are. And it wouldn't surprise me wouldn't shock me if we hear his name start to get growing momentum towards the end of the lottery.
I could have guessed this would have been one of your guys, Fink.
Really?
Yes, you have an affinity for this archetype, and
Because it hits.
Because it hits, and I think it says a lot about how you view basketball, how basketball is played right now, and just like the percentage chance that guys like this end up working in some capacity in the NBA. I mean, 6'10", still a little bit raw. Started playing basketball, as you mentioned, at 15 years old. He's overseas, and I think a lot of people stateside probably not as aware as the basketball community writ large is. But yeah, I think this is a really good one, a sleeper. Someone who has incredible athleticism, can play above the rim on both ends of the floor. Good shot blocking instincts, as you mentioned, led the Adriatic League in block percentage as a 19-year-old. This guy only started playing when he was 15. Like I think there's a pretty long runway for him to grow into something that could be really exciting. I don't know how high I would take him in this draft, but I did in my latest mock draft. I had him at 22. So that's, to me, like maybe in the range where he ends up going. And in this class, I think there's a lot of promising bigs: Esengue, Derek Queen, Danny Wolf, Common Malawach. I think you have to include him in the mix as someone who has a chance to rise. And I think there's a growing momentum, as you mentioned, kind of behind the scenes of like, oh, this guy like is a potential like late lottery, early 20s pick who has a ton of talent, just scratching the surface of what he can be.
And if I could just piggyback and wrap this up off of two things you said there, because we did a past episode on best big men in this draft, and one of the things we talked about is how there wasn't a lot of this archetype. Like Derek Queen is a different kind of big man. Danny Wolf is a different kind of big man.
Yep.
Esengue doesn't have quite this size or length, although similar archetype. So I think when you look at this class, other than Malawach, if you are looking for that rim running, shot blocking, lob threat, it's like, okay, I think Berija is the guy. But so I digress. I will yield the floor to you, Mr. Boone. Who is your first sleeper on your board?
I'm going with another big man, Danny Wolf. And I've been high on Danny Wolf. We've talked about Danny Wolf on the channel numerous times. And, he is the different archetype of big in this year's class. A, low center of gravity prospect. He's not going to be flying for lobs. He's not going to be flying above the rim, blocking shots. But I think Danny Wolf is being slept on in this class. We've seen here over the last couple of weeks, I know we've both done several mock drafts. Several times I've had Derek Queen going either late to mid lottery, or earlier this week we had a mock draft where we had Derek Queen inside the top 10. I think both of those guys are pretty similar, and I think they should be viewed very similarly. But Derek Queen is consistently now being mocked, as a potential top 10 pick, whereas Danny Wolf, I see him being mocked somewhere in like the 13 to 20 range. I don't think there's a reason for that other than, maybe there's some teams between them who end up going a different direction, either picking guards or wings. Danny Wolf is a very exciting prospect. He was more productive than Derek Queen last season. Obviously, he's a little bit older, but, as someone who is a playmaking hub, he was essentially a 7-foot point guard last season at Michigan. I think his defense is maybe a smidge underrated. Like, obviously, he has some limitations. He's not the most athletic big in this year's class, to put it lightly. But I think what he is as a playmaker, someone who can space the floor, there's a lot of value, I think, in Danny Wolf. And the idea of him being like a potential discount Derek Queen, like if you can take Derek Queen at number 9, I think there's a good reason to do that. But also, like, if you can get Danny Wolf at 19 instead, like, I don't know, I'd probably rather have Danny Wolf at 19 than, spending top 10 capital on Derek Queen, just because I think similarly skilled, similar talent levels with Derek Queen and Danny Wolf.
Yeah, Danny's got bigger size, to your point. I think one of the swing skill is going to be the shooting. I mean,
Yeah.
we saw him. He's an exceptional ball handler for his size. He's a really good passer, albeit one with a very high turnover rate, committed over 3 turnovers per game this year at Michigan. The shooting, I think, is just where it's at. I don't think he gets enough credit for as how good of a rebounder he is. 9.7 rebounds last year. But yeah, I mean, 33.6% from three, and then only 59% from the free throw line. So I think that's the swing skill. It's hard to be a skilled big if you don't consistently stretch the floor. He's got the hands and touch to do it. But for all the things he did do last year, shooting wasn't necessarily one of them. But to your point, you don't find many 6'11" guys who can handle and pass the basketball like he does. So listen, I've known Danny since he was at Northfield Mount Herman. I love Danny. I'm rooting for Danny. You probably have him higher on your board, but it could just be because I'm trying not to overrate the guys I've known the longest. So I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I will say that.
And and Derek Queen, I like Derek Queen too. So I'm only comping him just for this example. I think he's got a very bright future in the NBA, but he did only shoot 20% from three last season. As a late teenager. So, I think there's some holes in his game too. There's certainly not a perfect prospect in this class, aside from probably Cooper Flagg. I like Danny Wolf quite a bit, and I think he's being discounted and slipped into a range where he's going to end up being I think a pretty good value. If he ends up going outside the lottery, I will be ranking the grades very, very highly if he ends up slipping to whatever team gets him outside the lottery.
All right. Yeah, I think just talking around, I think that's probable. And in fact, I would put his stock. I think he could. You said, what did you say? 13 to 20. I would probably go 13 to 25.
Okay. Yeah.
So we shall see.
Yeah.
We'll see. All right, my turn.
Your turn. Hit me.
So my next two sleepers are both guys that I do not think are typically mocked as first round picks, but I think have a chance to end up in that range, and have a chance to just be NBA players. I think once you start talking about late first round, especially second round picks, it's guys who may or may not be true NBA players. These two players to me are true NBA players, and that's why I went with them. And this is essentially the antithesis of my first pick in Yoan Berija. But I'm going Ryan Kalkbrenner.
Oh.
Ryan Kalkbrenner, 7'1" without shoes on, 7'6" wingspan, 9'4" standing reach, which means there are only 6 players in the NBA this year who are bigger than Ryan Kalkbrenner. He was the 4-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year. We know he is a drop coverage monster. He puts a lid on the rim. His understanding, because he's not necessarily, he is not viewed as an explosive vertical athlete. But if you look at the combine measurements, I believe he ranked with the 3rd highest vertical leap among the true centers. So that was, I thought, a sneaky relevant data point. And then on top of that, there were some moments this year where he showed some deceptive switchability. You go back and watch that Creighton Marquette game and put in that tape where he's switching onto Cam Jones and visibly telling everybody, I got it. Didn't want the switch back. So I think that there is a lot to like here. Now, on top of that, there is some shooting upside. Now, we've talked about that for years, and it never fully clicked at Creighton. But I will say this. He made 34% of his threes this year at Creighton, and then he made 39% of his unguarded catch-and-shoot threes. He's not going to take a three in the NBA unless it's unguarded. And if he can make 39% of them, he's going to be allowed to take them. On top of that, he was 79% at the rim. So just a huge vertical spacer just because of that massive 9'4" standing reach. The final point I will make about Ryan Kalkbrenner, which I think is easy to underestimate or undervalue, is durability. Mm-hmm. For a player this size, he has a remarkable ability to stay healthy. We've seen it through 5 seasons at Creighton. He has proven himself to be far more durable than guys who are built like him. And the bottom line to me is that there are 30 teams in the NBA, And basically every one of them wants at least one guy like this, one drop coverage monster. And if it turns out he can make threes, he's going to end up being even better than the one drop coverage player that every roster looks to have that somewhere in their depth chart. That's my case for Ryan Kalkbrenner.
No, I like that pick. And he's consistently, I think, being mocked, or at least I've consistently had him mocked like 30 in a number of mock drafts. So like a late first round, early second round type prospect who, I think like maybe in the NBA draft, right? Like I think a lot of we just assume NBA teams like to bet on, potential upside, star power, whatever. Like, what are they going to be in 5 years? Not necessarily what they are going to be right now. Kalkbrenner is a guy who, like, I think could probably fit into an NBA rotation, like pretty early in his career and be impactful. Like, is he going to be an all-star? No, but like in the late first round, the chances of you hitting on, a productive player, much less an all-star in that range, is pretty unlikely. I think there's actually going to end up being probably a lot of value where Kalkbrenner ends up going. So I like that pick from you. Good pick.
Thanks, Boone. Boone. Yeah. Who you got?
Okay. I went with another young guy, Noah Esengue.
Okay.
Yeah. He is the second youngest player in this class. You already highlighted the third youngest player in this class. Of course, the first youngest player, Cooper Flagg, the number one.
He's good.
And he's a pretty good prospect. Esengue is a guy who I think is getting some steam leading into the draft. And I think that's in part because he's still playing. Like we have the pre-draft process playing out right now in Chicago. We've got, prospects working out for agencies in LA, doing interviews, etc. Meanwhile, Esengue is still playing and he's producing at a really high level. He's showing a lot of confidence playing overseas. Smooth moving forward, pretty good size, 6'10", sometimes depends on where you look at him. I've seen him listed at 6'9". He's made strides as a shooter. I think that's an area that he can improve on. He's definitely a long-term project, I think, just based on where he's at right now, but he's producing in a professional league. I think, in a couple years, he could end up being like a useful piece of a NBA rotation. And I think where he's being mocked right now, which is, well, I'll ask you, where would you take him in this year's draft? What range would you have him in?
I think it's going to come down to, I think the range begins at the end of the lottery, and he's probably another one that's maybe like 12 to 22, somewhere in that range. Because he's a long-term stock who's not, to your point, he's so young. He's not going to be ready to come in and make an immediate impact, but the long-term tools are certainly there. So I think it's really about finding someone who has the time to be patient, can invest in his development. A place like Brooklyn has 4 first-round picks. I don't think he's going to be in the mix at 7, but did they take somebody with this high upside and all those physical tools? That might make some sense. So yeah, I don't hate this at all, and I do think he's a little farther away. But I think the general theme it's very similar to what I said with Berija, is that there's a lot of these international prospects, and specifically these young Frenchmen, that I think local fans here in the States may not have a great appreciation for. And one of the talking points has been, because you've got guys like Yegor Demin and Kasparis Yakachonis who have come over, like, you do these lotteries, and lots of times people only do these mock drafts. People only look at the lottery and like, oh, I know this name. Kamen Malowacz, okay, those guys all play college basketball. Well, after like 10 or maybe 15, you're going to start to hear a lot of names that local college basketball fans aren't going to recognize. And Noah's certainly going to be one of them. I think Yoan's going to be one of them, and Nolan Traore is going to be another one, and there's Ben Serif's going to be one. So there's, so I like it. I like the fact that we're just kind of bringing attention for local fans.
And I think too, Fink, just to like kind of put a bow on this, there's probably a little bit more value for Esengue to specific teams. Like you mentioned, yes. Brooklyn, they have 4 first-round picks. They're not in, win now mode necessarily. Right. And they may have, a more risk tolerance for one, because they have 4 first-round picks. They may be willing to take bigger swings. And also they have a chance to play the longer view where they're trying to rebuild and establish, a culture, but also like setting expectations for what they're going to be in a couple years, not necessarily what they're going to be next season. Oklahoma City Thunder, I think, is kind of an interesting one where, that team is set. Like, they have so many picks over the next couple years. Just, I think, with the idea of having to pay people, Jalen Williams, SGA, like Chet Holmgren's going to be up for a contract. OKC could be in a position where they maybe stash him and develop him that way, or even Utah, a team that, could have been in the mix. It could have gotten the first pick easily, end up falling to number 5, but they have 2 first-round picks in this draft. I think that franchise is trying to play the smart game, again, similar to Brooklyn, where they're playing the longer game, not necessarily rushing, and they could be willing to take the longer view and decide that he is worth the investment, the project of developing him. And so, I think, there's some other teams who maybe would just, pass on him. But I think for certain teams, he could present some value here. I'll throw it back to you, Fink. Hit me with your final third name.
My last guy, and then you will sense the theme here because I went big. Maxime Raynaud.
Yeah. All right.
7 foot plus, bare feet, 236 pounds. Not great. I mean, relative length, 7'1" and change wingspan, but was certainly someone who helped himself at the combine. He averaged 20 points, 11 rebounds, 2 assists last year at Stanford. Shooting splits were 45% from the field, 35 from the 3-point line, 77 from the free throw line. The number that really grabbed my attention, though, do you know what he shot on open catch and shoot threes?
So he was a pretty good, just 3-point shooter in general, I believe, last season at Stanford. So I would say, you said open catch and shoot?
Open catch and shoot threes.
A pretty good number would be 41%. So I'll guess 41%.
49%.
49%. Okay.
On open catch and shoot threes. And this is a guy who is 7'1" and can windmill dunk.
Yeah,
and
that's
he's got, I think, one of the best shot fakes in this draft. I know that's very granular. But he can shoot it, he can shot fake, he can put it on the floor. The passing is going to be interesting. If you just watch the highlight tape, there's some things where you're like, oh, you can really thread the needle. And then you dig into you watch a full game or you dig into the metrics and you're like, oh, that turnover rate's really, really high. So that's going to be something to watch. I think the bottom line is that it's going to come down to his defense, but offensively with the size, with the shooting, and with the athleticism, there's a lot of reasons to really like him. I'll also say too, Boone, he does not have a necessarily pretty release. I mean, this is an extended arm-driven release that looks kind of slower, and I think extended is just the best word. So when you look at the numbers and you're like, I mean, for me, when I looked it up and I was like, whoa, 49%, you're 7'1". There's a lot of, I thought it was appropriate that people were excited in Chicago. This is another guy that had basically no first round momentum up until about a week or so ago. I still think most people would consider him on the outside looking in at the first round. There are some people who love him though. And I think it wouldn't be shocking if we heard his name on draft night from Adam Silver and not after it gets to the second round.
No, I love that one. As a draft nerd in my free time, I follow No Ceilings, which is, they do a
shout out No Ceilings.
No Ceilings. They do a great job covering the NBA draft, and just some of their in-depth scouting stuff is just right up my alley. And they turned me on to Raynaud pretty early. So I'm not surprised that he's getting attention, but I think you're right. This was a guy who was largely being slept on. This is perfect for our sleepers episode. And I think he has at least captured the attention of NBA teams to the point where if he goes in the first round, it wouldn't be terribly surprising. I'm looking at his numbers here. Last season, shot 34.7% from 3-point range. He took almost 6 per game. The year before, 36.1% from 3-point range. And the versatility that he brings at his size, I think, is alluring, appealing, all of the words. He's an exciting prospect for a center who can do a lot of different things. He's very versatile. The ability to put the ball on the floor at his size is alien-esque in many ways. So a very interesting one. I like this addition here. He actually averaged a career high last season, 10.6 rebounds per game. I think if not for Cooper Flagg, he may have won ACC Player of the Year last season. He was really good, kind of hiding in plain sight.
He's also like a genius. I forget where, you looked at the things he studied, and I can't remember if it's like medicine or engineering, but he's like super bright, every bit what you would expect from the Stanford student. I remember when he first went into the portal last year, it was like, yeah, he's not leaving Stanford. You should see this guy's course of study. So yeah, I like it. I think there's some potential. We hear his name in the first round. If not, I think he's a very good candidate to get a guaranteed deal in the second.
He's a mathematics and computer science double major at Stanford. And he was NABC Honors Award winner in 2024. So yeah, pretty sharp guy. Seems like a guy you would want to bet on somewhere in the first round. So that's an exciting one. All right. Well, I'll wrap it up here with our final one. And we've talked about him a couple times. It's Cedric Coward. I'm not entirely.
What?
This
is not a sleeper.
Okay.
We are recording this show in late May. If this were late April, this would have been great. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Hear me out. In the context of him being a sleeper, my argument for Cedric Coward is a lot of people know Cedric Coward now from the NBA Draft Combine and Combine Week and what we've talked about this week as, this guy could have gone to Duke. He's going to go into the NBA draft. He's going to be a first-round pick. I think now we're to the point where, and maybe I'm jumping the shark here a little bit, I think if Cedric Coward is, how bold do I want to be here? I think if he's a top 10 pick, people will be very surprised, but I wouldn't be I'd be a little surprised. Okay, how about this? If he's a lottery pick, I think a lot of people will be surprised, but I wouldn't be terribly surprised. How about that? I think his range starts at like number 10 at this draft. Am I crazy?
So I will say this.
Yeah.
I think one of the last thing I want to do is instigate draft Twitter because there's been some shenanigans this week. So I don't want to upset anybody, but I do think there is this little bit of a trend where when somebody starts to go nuts, and I'm not talking about you here, like everybody tries to get like bolder and bolder with their claim. So Cedric Coward, certainly a stock riser in Chicago, but it's like, okay, at what point has the pendulum swung too much? You know what I mean? When we start talking about him inside the top 10, that's where I'm like, hold on, guys. Like for me, maybe I'm wrong, but that's just like for me, because I think, and I think we've kind of seen it earlier, like Con Knepel. You remember, what was it? We were doing this in early January, and I was like, yeah, Con Knepel's the guy I'm higher on than most. And now people are talking about him like he's the third pick in the draft, which again, I think is just too far in the opposite direction. Yeah. Same thing with Carter Bryant, like 6 points, 4 rebounds per game. I'm like, yeah, I think he's a lottery pick. That's higher than most. And now it's like, no, he's guaranteed top 10 lock. And it's like, you may be, but like maybe not, So I do think that the prospects who start to emerge, there's this tendency for people to go all in on them, when I think the essence of why they emerged late is because they are not necessarily, their future success is not necessarily a foregone conclusion. So just that observation from a macro level, not specifically about Coward, but I will say I think he's a first round lock. He's not going to Duke. Where do you have him? You said 10, 12?
No, I have him at 18. I haven't clearly I've not been the one to set draft Twitter ablaze. I don't have a ton of hot takes, Fink. Like I try to look at things through a lens where like where do I think is
you've had reasonable. Some hot takes. We don't need to start talking about Jaden Ivey here.
I still believe. I still believe, brother. I still believe.
And you should listen. Everybody should have a hot take, because if there's one certainty about this and every draft, it is that there will be surprises. Yeah. So the worst thing you can do when you're talking about the draft is subscribe to groupthink, because groupthink will inevitably be wrong. There are always surprises.
Agreed. And I don't know what you're talking about NBA draft Twitter engagement farming. But
I don't even know what engagement farming means. I did not say that.
What is
engagement? Can we get a ruling from what is engagement farming?
Yeah, we're gonna need an explainer here.
Engagement farming is just we're trying to get a reaction out of draft Twitter.
Got it.
That's what we're doing. That's what that is.
No, I try to have people not call me stupid. I like to be right, and I'm competitive with it, but I try not to have hot takes for the sake of hot takes.
Yes, agreed. And what you were describing, people, taking a Cedric Coward, for example, as a lottery, a Chicago Combine riser, and then saying, oh, actually Cedric Coward's the number 4 prospect in the class for me. I don't think people are doing that, but that would be an example of engagement farming, just completely jumping the shark. I don't think Cedric Coward's going to be a top 10 pick. I don't have him as a top 10 pick. I'm not projecting him as a top 10 pick, but I think
you got him at 18, which I'm if we said 15 to for me, it's 17 to 27, 15 to 27, something like that.
Yeah. But he is a sleeper, even if to us, maybe he's not a sleeper so much.
Yeah, we might have to do an addendum to the show, get Boone to get his 3rd pick back. But that's gonna do it for today's show, folks.
Just cut the last 10 minutes off. Just cut the last.
Oh, we learned about engagement farming. This was terrific.
All right, let's get out of here, Fink. Thank you. I will not see you again the rest of the week, barring something unforeseen. So I hope you miss me. And it's been good chatting with you. Thank you for joining me. Thank you, Nada, for producing. Thank you for watching the show. Please go subscribe to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube. We'll see you back here next week. Till then, see ya.